Why is it that some men stay calm in chaos, while others lose control the moment pressure rises? We live in a world of constant noise, notifications, opinions, comparisons. We scroll before we think. We react before we reflect. And slowly, without realizing it, our minds become scattered, sharp in speed, but dull in depth. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Intelligence is not about how fast you speak or how much you know. It's about how well you command your inner world. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet his greatest battle was never external. It was the discipline of his own thoughts. A sharp mind is not loud. It is trained. Today, we're going to explore 7 Stoic habits that quietly forge unusual mental clarity. Habits that separate reactive men from composed thinkers. Stay with me. By the end, you'll know exactly where your mind stands and how to sharpen it daily. 1. They train discomfort daily. The modern world trains you to avoid friction. Everything is designed to make life smoother, faster, easier. Climate-controlled homes, one-click purchases, endless streaming. Even emotional discomfort is medicated, muted, or distracted away. But here's the quiet danger. Comfort weakens cognition. When everything is easy, your mind stops adapting. And when your mind stops adapting, it dulls. A sharp mind is not built in ease. It is built in resistance. The Stoics practiced something radical for their time, and still radical now: voluntary discomfort. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, would deliberately sleep on the floor and eat the simplest food for days at a time, not because he lacked comfort, but because he refused to depend on it. He asked himself, "Is this what I feared?" That question sharpened him. Discomfort forces awareness. Think about your most mentally alert moments. Were they during relaxation or during challenge? When you step into cold water, your breath tightens. Your body resists. Every instinct screams, "Get out." And yet, if you stay, something shifts. You override impulse. That override is mental training. It's not about the cold shower. It's about who's in control. The same mechanism activates when you wake up early instead of hitting snooze. Finish a tough workout after a long day. Have a difficult conversation instead of postponing it. Sit in silence instead of scrolling your phone. Each time you choose mild, controlled discomfort, you strengthen discipline over impulse, and discipline sharpens thought. In modern America, pressure comes differently than it did in ancient Rome. It might look like a tense performance review, financial uncertainty, a business setback, relationship conflict. If you've trained only in comfort, stress feels catastrophic. But if you've trained in resistance, stress feels familiar, and familiarity reduces panic. This is why voluntary hardship works. You're teaching your nervous system, "I can handle this." You expand your threshold. What used to overwhelm you becomes manageable. What used to trigger emotion becomes data. And here's the key. When discomfort no longer terrifies you, you think clearly under pressure. Most people react to discomfort by escaping it. Sharp minds lean into it, strategically, not recklessly, not self-destructively, but deliberately. Here's your daily practice. Choose one small discomfort every day. Get 60 seconds of cold water at the end of your shower. Start the hardest task first. Delay gratification by 30 minutes. Speak truth when it feels uncomfortable. No announcement, no performance, just discipline. Over time, your identity shifts. You stop seeing discomfort as a threat. You start seeing it as training. Comfort feeds impulse. Discomfort feeds clarity. A dull mind seeks ease. A sharp mind builds tolerance. Discomfort is not punishment. It is your sharpening stone. 2. They control emotional reactions. A fast reaction is not a sign of intelligence. It is often a sign of poor control. We live in a culture that rewards immediacy. Instant replies, instant opinions, instant outrage. Someone cuts you off in traffic. You react. A coworker criticizes you. You react. A comment online challenges you. You react. And each reaction costs clarity. The sharper the mind, the slower the reaction. The Stoics understood something that modern neuroscience now confirms. Emotion is automatic, but response is a choice. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice what he says. Not power over events. Power over your mind. That distinction changes everything. When someone disrespects you in a meeting, well, your body reacts before your intellect does. Heart rate rises. Muscles tighten. Thoughts accelerate. If you speak in that state, you are not thinking, you are discharging. A sharp mind does something different. It pauses. That pause is microscopic. Sometimes just 3 seconds. But it is powerful. Because in that pause, you reclaim authorship. Here is the Stoic 3-step reset. Pause. Breathe. Question. Pause. Interrupt the automatic reaction. Breathe. Slow the nervous system. Question. What is actually happening here? Is this a threat to my survival? Or just to my ego? Most of the time it's ego. And ego-driven reactions distort thinking. Consider a common American workplace scenario. Your manager says, "B, this presentation isn't strong enough." An impulsive mind hears, "You're incompetent." A disciplined mind hears, "There's room to improve." Same event, different interpretation. Emotional mastery sharpens cognition because it removes distortion. When you're calm, you see nuance. When you're triggered, you see enemies. Sharp thinkers are not emotionless. They simply refuse to be ruled by emotion. They understand that anger narrows vision. Fear exaggerates threats. Pride blocks correction. Control doesn't mean suppression, it means observation. Instead of saying, "I am angry," they think, "Anger is present." That subtle shift creates distance, and distance creates clarity. Imagine 2 men in the same argument. One raises his voice, interrupts, tries to win. The other lowers his voice, listens fully, responds slowly. That's which one appears stronger, which one thinks more clearly. Calm is intimidating because it signals control, and control is rare. You don't sharpen your mind by being louder. You sharpen it by being steadier. Here's a simple daily drill. The next time you feel triggered, delay your response by 10 seconds. 10 seconds of silence, 10 seconds of breath, 10 seconds of observing your own internal state. You'll notice something powerful. The emotional wave peaks, then falls. And when it falls, reason returns. That is the edge. Most people live in reaction mode. Sharp minds live in response mode. Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen, and the man who chooses his response chooses the direction of his life. The sharper the mind, the greater the gap between stimulus and action. 3. They focus only on what they control. Mental energy is limited, but most men spend it carelessly. They argue about politics they can't influence. They obsess over market fluctuations they can't predict. They replay conversations they can't change. They stress about outcomes they don't command. And slowly, their cognitive bandwidth drains. A sharp mind treats attention like currency. The Stoics built their philosophy on one foundational distinction: what is within your control and what is not. Epictetus put it plainly. Some things are up to us and some things are not. Simple. But almost no one lives this way. When layoffs happen in your industry, you cannot control the decision. When inflation rises, you cannot control the economy. When someone dislikes you, you cannot control their opinion. But you can control your preparation, your skill development, your response, your work ethic, your character. And that shift is where sharpness begins. An unfocused mind tries to control everything. A disciplined mind filters. Here's the hidden cost of ignoring this principle. Anxiety. Anxiety often isn't caused by difficulty. It's caused by misplaced control. When your brain attempts to solve unsolvable variables, it spins. But when you redirect attention to what you can influence, clarity returns. Imagine two men during a company restructuring. One spends hours venting, speculating, worrying about rumors. The other updates his resume, strengthens his network, sharpens his skills, and prepares for interviews. Same environment, different locus of control. Which mind remains sharper? The second man isn't naive, and he simply understands that worry without action is cognitive waste. A powerful daily filter is this question: is this within my control? If yes, act. If no, release. Release doesn't mean apathy. It means refusing to burn mental energy on uncontrollable variables. This principle becomes especially powerful in relationships. You cannot control how someone feels about you. You cannot control whether they appreciate your effort. But you can control whether you act with integrity. You can control whether you communicate clearly. You can control whether you leave when standards are not met. Sharp minds do not try to manage other people's emotions. They manage their own actions. The modern world profits from your distraction. News cycles, outrage culture, algorithmic feeds, all designed to hook your attention into endless loops. But attention is intelligence. Where your attention goes, your cognitive strength follows. If you scatter it across noise, your thinking weakens. If you concentrate it on execution, your thinking sharpens. Here's a practical drill. Draw 2 columns on a sheet of paper. Left side, within my control. Right side, outside my control. Take one current stressor in your life and sort it honestly. You'll be surprised how little actually belongs on the left side. Now act only on the left. This simple discipline reduces mental clutter immediately. Because clarity isn't about knowing more. It's about filtering better. When you stop fighting the uncontrollable, you gain power over the controllable. And that power compounds. A dull mind reacts to the world. A sharp mind directs its effort inward. Control your actions. Release the rest. That is not weakness. It is strategic intelligence. 4. They think long-term. Memento Mori. Most people don't lack intelligence. They lack urgency. They delay hard decisions. They postpone uncomfortable growth. They assume there will always be more time, and that assumption dulls the mind. A sharp mind lives with awareness of limitation. The Stoics practiced Memento Mori. Remember that you will die, not to become morbid, but to become precise. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." That sentence alone can rearrange your priorities. When you believe time is abundant, you tolerate mediocrity. When you remember time is finite, you eliminate distraction. Think about how many decisions become clearer under time pressure. If you knew you had 1 year left, would you still stay in that unfulfilling job? Would you delay starting that business idea? Would you keep holding grudges? Would you keep scrolling for hours at night? Mortality sharpens evaluation. It forces prioritization. It exposes what actually matters. Modern culture numbs us from this awareness. Entertainment is endless. Work can be repetitive. Days blur into months. Months blur into years. But the clock never pauses. And here's the paradox. When you ignore death, you waste life. When you acknowledge death, you sharpen life. A long-term thinker filters decisions differently. He asks, will this matter in 5 years? Is this worth my limited time? Does this align with the man I intend to become? Instead of chasing short bursts of dopamine, he invests in compounding growth. In America, this might mean choosing skill development over late-night distraction, like investing consistently instead of chasing trends, building physical health now instead of fixing damage later, repairing relationships before regret arrives. Time awareness eliminates trivial conflict. When someone insults you, you think, "Is this worth a fragment of my limited life?" Often the answer is no. That's cognitive maturity. And here's something powerful. Thinking long-term reduces emotional volatility. When your time horizon expands, your reactions shrink. Short-term minds panic over daily fluctuations. Long-term minds zoom out. Market dips, career setbacks, temporary embarrassment. From a 20-year perspective, most of it becomes insignificant. This doesn't make you passive. It makes you strategic. Here's a nightly exercise. Before bed, ask yourself 3 questions. If today were my last, what would I regret not doing? Did I spend time on what truly matters? What one action tomorrow aligns with my long-term identity? Write the answers down. You will notice your decisions start shifting. You become less reactive, more deliberate, more focused. Mortality awareness doesn't depress a sharp mind. It disciplines it. Because when you understand that time is borrowed, you stop negotiating with distraction. You stop delaying hard conversations. You stop tolerating what weakens you. A dull mind lives as if it has forever. A sharp mind acts as if today matters. Live with urgency, not panic. Live with perspective, not procrastination. Time does not need to be feared. It needs to be respected. 5. They observe before they speak. Most men talk too quickly. They answer before fully understanding the question. They interrupt to prove competence. They speak to dominate, not to understand. But sharp minds collect information before releasing words. Observation is cognitive leverage. In meetings, in negotiations, in relationships, the man who listens longer sees more. Silence is not weakness, it is data collection. The Stoics valued restraint. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to be quick to hear, slow to speak. Because speech reveals your thinking, but silence refines it. When you speak impulsively, you expose unfinished thoughts. When you observe patiently, you refine your response. Consider a leadership scenario in a modern American workplace. A team debate gets heated. Opinions fly. Everyone wants to prove they're right. And the loudest voice often appears confident. But the calm observer, the one who listens, takes notes, studies tone and body language, sees the underlying tension. He sees who is insecure, who is defending ego, where the real issue hides, what solution will actually work. That is sharpness. Listening expands perspective, and perspective reduces error. There's a reason experienced negotiators ask more questions than they answer. Because the one who talks first often gives away leverage. The one who listens gains it. Sharp minds follow a simple rule. Understand fully, then respond precisely. Not emotionally, not defensively, precisely. Here's a practical exercise. The next time someone speaks, delay your reply by 5 seconds. Maintain eye contact. Process what they said. Ask one clarifying question before offering your opinion. Now you'll notice something powerful. Conversations slow down. Your responses become cleaner. And people begin to perceive you differently, more grounded, more thoughtful, more authoritative. Because authority does not shout, it calculates. Observation also protects you from manipulation. When someone flatters excessively, a reactive mind absorbs it. A sharp mind observes patterns. When someone criticizes unfairly, a reactive mind defends immediately. A sharp mind listens, filters, and decides what deserves energy. Silence gives you space. Space gives you clarity. And clarity sharpens judgment. There's another benefit: emotional regulation. When you observe before speaking, you prevent emotional spillover. Anger dissolves faster. Embarrassment fades quicker. Ego softens. You gain composure, and composure increases cognitive precision. And a dull mind fills silence with noise. A sharp mind uses silence as strategy. Before you speak, ask, is this necessary? Is this useful? Is this aligned with who I want to be? If not, hold it. The goal is not to speak less, it is to speak with intention, because words, once released, cannot be reclaimed. But silence strengthens you. Sharp minds don't rush to be heard. They make sure what they say is worth hearing. 6. They separate ego from truth. Nothing dulls the mind faster than ego. Ego wants to be right. Ego wants to win. Ego wants to protect its image. But truth does not care about your image. And a sharp mind chooses truth over pride. Most intellectual stagnation doesn't come from lack of knowledge. It comes from defensiveness. Someone critiques your idea. You feel tension. You prepare counter-arguments before fully listening. That is ego protecting identity. But identity built on fragility cannot grow. Epictetus taught that if someone points out a flaw and they are correct, you should be grateful, because they've revealed something you can improve. Think about how rare that mindset is today. In modern culture, disagreement feels like attack. Correction feels like insult. But a sharp mind asks one powerful question: what if they're right? That question alone expands intelligence. Consider a business scenario. You present a proposal. A colleague says, "This section is weak." An ego-driven mind hears, "You're incompetent." A disciplined mind hears, "There may be an oversight." One shuts down, the other upgrades. Sharp thinkers understand that being wrong is not a threat, it is feedback. Ego resists correction because it ties self-worth to opinion, but a Stoic separates self-worth from outcome. Your value does not collapse because your idea needs refinement. Your strength grows when you adjust. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private notes that if someone can show him he is mistaken, he would gladly change, because he seeks truth, not victory. That is cognitive maturity. Ask yourself honestly, how often do you defend before you understand? How often do you argue to protect status rather than improve accuracy? A dull mind debates to dominate. A sharp mind debates to discover. Here's a practical drill. The next time someone disagrees with you, let them finish completely. Repeat their point back to them. Ask, "What am I missing?" That third step dismantles ego instantly, because it signals openness, and openness accelerates growth. There's another benefit. When you detach ego from truth, you reduce emotional volatility. You no longer see correction as humiliation. You see it as calibration. Calibration sharpens performance. Pilots constantly recalibrate instruments. Athletes review game footage. Executives analyze mistakes. They do not take error personally. They treat it as data. So your mind works the same way. If ego blocks data, growth stops. If ego steps aside, clarity expands. The goal is not self-criticism, it is self-honesty. Self-honesty builds internal strength because the man who can admit error cannot be destabilized by it. A dull mind protects image. A sharp mind protects accuracy. Ego resists, intelligence adjusts, and the man who adjusts quickly becomes mentally formidable. 7. They live by virtue, not validation. There is one habit that makes all the others sustainable. Without it, discipline collapses. Without it, discomfort becomes ego. Without it, control becomes performance. Sharp minds anchor themselves in virtue, not validation. Modern culture is built on approval metrics, likes, promotions, titles, status, recognition. You are constantly measured. And if you build your identity on those measurements, your mind becomes unstable. Because validation is external, and external things fluctuate. One day you are praised. The next day you are ignored. One quarter your business grows. The next quarter it dips. If your clarity depends on applause, your thinking will swing with the crowd. The Stoics built identity differently. For them, the highest good was virtue, character expressed through action, wisdom, courage, justice, self-control. These were internal standards. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that reputation is noise. What mattered was whether he acted with integrity, even when unseen. That is stability. When you live for validation, you constantly scan the room. Do they approve? Did that impress them? Am I winning? That scanning consumes cognitive energy. But when you live by virtue, the standard is internal. You ask, was I disciplined? Was I honest? Did I act with courage? Did I control my impulses? That shift creates mental freedom, because now your clarity does not depend on anyone's reaction. Imagine two men building a business. The first checks social media comments every hour. The second reviews his systems, improves his product, studies his numbers. The first chases perception, the second builds substance. It's over time, which mind sharpens. Validation-driven identity creates emotional volatility. If praised, you feel powerful. If criticized, you feel crushed. Virtue-driven identity creates steadiness. If praised, you stay grounded. If criticized, you evaluate calmly, because your worth is not on trial. Your character is your anchor, and anchored minds think clearly. This also protects you from comparison, one of the fastest ways to dull intelligence. When you constantly compare income, body, status, or lifestyle, your focus fragments. But when your metric is virtue, comparison fades. You are not competing for applause. You are competing with yesterday's version of yourself. That internal competition sharpens discipline. Here's a powerful daily recalibration. At the end of each day, to ask, did I act according to my values, even when no one was watching? That question builds quiet strength, because it shifts attention from outcome to conduct. And conduct is controllable. Outcomes are not. The man who acts with virtue does not panic when results fluctuate. He adjusts, he learns, he continues. That steadiness creates long-term sharpness. Without virtue, intelligence becomes manipulation. With virtue, intelligence becomes wisdom. A dull mind seeks approval. A sharp mind seeks alignment. Alignment between values and action. When that alignment exists, your thinking stabilizes, and stability under pressure is rare. Virtue is not moral posturing, it is structural integrity. Just like a building with a strong foundation resists storms, a man anchored in virtue resists chaos. And chaos is where sharpness is tested. And if you train discomfort, control emotion, focus on what you can control, think long-term, observe carefully, detach ego, but still crave validation, your clarity will eventually fracture. But if you anchor everything in virtue, your mind becomes unusually steady. And steadiness is the ultimate edge. Sharpness is not loud. It is disciplined, it is controlled, it is focused, it is humble. And above all, it is principled. Sharpness is not a talent. It is not something you're born with. It is something you build, decision by decision. You've just seen the pattern. Sharp minds train discomfort instead of avoiding it. They control reactions instead of exploding. They focus on what they can influence instead of drowning in noise. They think long-term instead of chasing short-term comfort. They observe before speaking. They detach ego from truth. And above all, they live by virtue, not validation. None of these habits are flashy. None of them go viral. But over time, they create something rare: stability under pressure. And in a world that is loud, reactive, distracted, and emotionally fragile, stability is power. This isn't about having a high IQ. It's about having high discipline. Anyone can collect information. Few can control themselves. And control is what sharpens thought. If you want to test yourself honestly, don't ask, "Am I smart?" Ask, "Do I seek comfort or resistance? Do I react or respond? Do I chase applause or alignment?" Because your answers to those questions determine the edge of your mind. The Stoics did not train for easy days. They trained for storms, and when the storm came, they did not panic. They stood steady. That steadiness is available to you, but only if you practice daily. So here's your challenge. Choose one of these 7 habits and implement it starting today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Sharpening the mind is not dramatic. It is deliberate. And the man who deliberately sharpens his mind becomes difficult to intimidate, difficult to manipulate, and difficult to break. Train it. Guard it. Strengthen it. Because a sharp mind is not just an advantage, it is freedom.